If you're concerned about the future of your organization when you step down, then Where Will the Mantle Fall? A biblical and legal guide to succession planning is a must-read for you. It delves into the scriptural and legal aspect of succession planning, characteristics of successors, the people, the process, church bylaws, common myths, even issues with nepotism. Where Will the Mantle Fall? Written by Richmond's own attorney, Pastor Travell Travis, and available at Amazon.com. Looking to start a church, business, or nonprofit organization in 2022? Do you need help forming an LLC, applying for a copyright or trademark, revising church laws, crafting a succession plan, or developing a compensation package for your pastor and staff? Contact the law office of Travell Travis, a Richmond-based legal boutique focused on the needs of pastors, entrepreneurs, creatives, and our community. Let's make your vision a reality in 2022. Visit TravellTravis.com. That's TRAVELL Travis.com.
Good evening and welcome to the latest episode of Mantle Mondays. I'm so honored to be your host, Travell Travis, and you're in for a treat. I invite you now to like, invite, share, tag, even subscribe to our YouTube channel, Law Office of Travell Travis. If you're interested in succession planning, corporate America, but even if you have a young man or young lady interested in playing at the collegiate level, playing at the professional level in sports, and you're concerned about how they're going to navigate perhaps the challenges and the temptations of perhaps playing at that level or being in college, I want you to gather them around tonight for this interview. This man, I love him. He is my brother. We serve together on the Board of Bishops for the Way of the Cross Church. We also serve on the Board of Trustees for the Way of the Cross Church. And anybody knows him, he is the comedian of the board. and so he is a gentle giant, fierce of the field. But when it comes to God and to the people of God, he has a heart of pure gold. And so without further delay, it's a pleasure to introduce our guest tonight, Bishop Troy Barnett. Good evening, Bishop.
Hello, sir. How are we doing tonight?
Doing well. Thank you so much for being our guest tonight for Mantle Mondays. I felt to mention in the intro, pastor of Refuge Way of the Cross Church in Baltimore, Maryland, former New England Patriot, former Washington Redskin Commanders, and now executive, not with Under Armour, but what's the company?
SAP.
SAP. So this man wears numerous hats. So for him to take time out of his schedule to be with us tonight, we are elated, and you are in for a treat. And so I'm going to jump right in. And I sent you some questions, and we said we would go by some and go extemporaneously from others. But I want to deal with this issue specifically of retirement, especially of professional athletes, because I think it's such a parallel with professional athletes and even the ministry. You know, it's one thing to, as a professional athlete, perhaps having a serious injury, perhaps, no longer having the love for the game anymore. But what do you do when you're perhaps older and you still love it? You still can play at a high level, but perhaps there's a little bit more pressure to turn it over. And so my question specifically goes to quarterback Tom Brady. What is going through his mind as a professional athlete when I want to retire, I don't want to retire, my family wants me to, but I don't want to? What's going on there?
Well, I would say it is the adrenaline rush behind professional sports.
Okay.
And there really is nothing like the locker room, the camaraderie with players, coming in from different areas, different locations, different backgrounds, all to have a common goal, to win it, to get to the Super Bowl and to win it. You can't replace that.
Okay.
And it's hard to replace that. Even with guys who have got a chance to play, don't play as long as he's been able to play. When you leave the game, it's hard. It probably took me 5 years before I could even watch a game and enjoy it.
Really?
Yeah. I had 3 surgeries in 2 weeks, so my knees and ankles were pretty much shot, and couldn't move as a defensive lineman like I used to, and kind of flared around a little bit trying to get back in. But when I realized it was over, I felt like I had unfinished business. But there's a lot of gentlemen who got a chance to play who have that same mentality that, it's never long enough. And so I've even, when I made my transition, and luckily for me, fortunate for me, is I was working for Reebok every summer while I was in New England. And so I started my transition, at least understanding that it's not going to be forever. I think it was Andre Tippett, who's now a Hall of Famer from New England, said NFL stands for not for long. And so he was the one that really pushed me to say, you need to make sure you have something to do outside of football, because, you got a golden opportunity now, but we never know how it's going to end. So he was really the catalyst for me getting into technology every summer. And so when I made my transition, and there were a lot of players. I did a pilot program for the NFL office, where we followed 20 guys who were trying to make that transition. Some played, 3 years, some played 10. We had varying amount of years that they played, and they all had the same story. Wow. That transition is painful, it's hard, and it's the mental battle that you deal with of just, from naming lights to a commoner, so to speak, it was just hard to deal with. And so it's, I don't even want to stay with the stats of what happens after that.
So whether you are injured or whether you've lost the passion for the game, or whether you won a championship, or whether you're on a losing streak, the transition is difficult regardless. That
is correct. It is painful. It is
painful. And you said a specific phrase, unfinished business. And I've wrestled, and people have said this about him. What unfinished business, or what else does he have to accomplish? What is he talking about?
For him, he's a quarterback. He runs the show. I mean, can you imagine just the sheer power and the adrenaline that comes with his position, and what he's been able to do it at such a high level over the years? I remember reading an article that quarterback for the Denver Broncos, John Elway, wrote. Well, he left after 17 years, I believe he played in the league. And he talked about that transition of, what do I do now? Right. He had to learn he talked about having to learn to date his wife again. He didn't know who she was. They raised kids, but their relationships with the kids was all wrapped around football. And so it's almost like your life is on pause until your career is over or is finished. And so for Tom right now, it's just pure adrenaline and really pushing the envelope. He's been fortunate because less than 5% get a chance to play as long as he's been able to play at the level he's been able to play at. So he's just a blessed man.
So do you think, barring a catastrophic injury, God forbid, God not allow it to happen, forbid, do you see him walking away on his own?
Oh yeah, he will. He will.
At 50, like what would be the criteria? Like, is it a Jerry Rice thing where one day you just can't play anymore? Like,
well, it'll be for I think for Tom, he'll even after this year, even if he plays this year at a high level, he'll still be pondering coming back another year. So
because I looked at it, you could walk away from the Super Bowl win and then say, well, I want to be defending champ. Then the following year, you lose in the playoffs and you feel like, well, I don't want to go out with a loss. So
Right.
then it's like, well, which one are you going? You gonna go out with the win, or you gonna go out with the loss? Like you can't pick one. So then, what parallel? So let me ask before I get into the parallels: has the NFL developed a successful transition program?
They have a really good transition program if the players take advantage of it.
Okay.
That is the key. That is the key. You're talking about guys coming out of college. Now I think the minimum base salary of the NFL is like $475,000 for 6 months of work. And if they don't know how to budget, they don't understand the tax bracket they're in. They don't understand they got to pay taxes every state they play in. They got family, they got friends, they got entourage, they got a lot of things pulling at them. And if they're not strong enough to really say, I know this is not going to last for long. I need to make my mark, and I need to be focused on football, but also focus on my finance and take advantage of the programs that the NFL has to offer, they become a statistic. 75% end up in bankruptcy in less than 2 years after leaving the league. 85% end up in alcoholism and divorce after leaving the league. The statistics behind individuals who leave the league and their families it's astounding. It's so bad because of that whole transition and one day being able to eat what you want and having a career to now trying to figure out what you're going to do with the rest of your life.
So the parallels to the church, do you see parallels when it's time for perhaps a pastor or leader to hang up the cleats, for a metaphor? What are the similarities there? What are there criteria we go by?
I think and when it comes to the church, it has to be the leading of the Lord.
Okay.
And it has to be, you've done what you can do and be happy with the fact that God has allowed you to get to that point, but be ready to hand that over to somebody and support them and push them to take it to that next level. And I think that's one of the areas I think we have to do a better job of. And I think that all comes back to even from a financial perspective, because, when you start looking at a lot of pastors are surviving off of the church. And
So you think that's the main reason most don't retire is the financial reason?
I believe that's a lot. I believe that's a big part of it.
Okay.
Because where do you go? I mean, how do you continue to live? How do you continue to support yourself? Do we truly have established 401k plans like we do on our job for churches? I mean, for pastors, is there a bonus program? Is there, what happens, to that leader's spouse off the scene when that pastor's gone? Who takes care of her or him, depending on what the situation is?
So if you had to choose, you think it's more of a financial than ego or insignificance? Like you said, hey, you've been in charge. You've been the center of attention. Now you're on the bench, you're on the sideline. But in the end, you think it's more of the financials than those.
I believe it's both, especially when you get to a place where, let's look at Apostle Candy. He led the organization for 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then at the end, he walked away from it, but then he walks away from the church. Not walk away from the church, that's a strong term, but he, hands over the leadership of the church. And for a person who's always been in leadership, that's hard, Doc.
Right.
That is difficult because you've always been, that person that people depended on and went to. And, there is an adrenaline rush behind even that.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest. There are some times when we're preaching and God gets a hold of us that you feel something that you've never felt before. And you feel that spiritual push that you want on a regular basis. And so sometimes that can be, hard to get away from. And let's look at, some of our things that we've seen in the past. We've got spiritual leaders that have done well in the ministry and done well for themselves. But then they're treated like rock stars in the church sometimes. You think about it, and everybody wants your attention. Everybody wants calling your name. Everybody wants you to come. And you got to be very careful even with that, because that transition is just much like the NFL. Who's going to call your name when you hang it up? Are you going to be able to be okay with, hey, being a former bishop, being a former pastor? Are you going to be okay with walking away and just, being good, but it's, it's gonna, that's going to be hard.
And honestly, not at the pastor level, but I experienced that somewhat with the Youth for Christ, because it was something I had done from age 13 to age 41. It was all I knew. So I was almost like a football player that's been playing since flag football or AAU basketball. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, who am I? Who am I when you take this away from me?
That's the question, Doc. That was the question every athlete asks himself when he walks off that field or he files his retirement papers. Who am I? Who am I? And that transition to figure out who you are is very painful and difficult when you don't have a transition plan in place. Luckily for me, I had a transition plan in place with working in IT every summer when I was playing. And so I was able to transition directly into that. But even that was a little bit, humbling, very humbling, because you go from making six figures to, punching a clock like everybody else. And everybody used to seeing you Sunday on the field. Now they watch you come to work like everybody else on Monday. So you talk about an ego check.
So do you have a place to talk about that like that? Like, I imagine you had to keep those thoughts and feelings bottled up. Like, did you have an outlet to talk about, like, man, this is rough being a regular guy again?
There was nobody to talk to except for former players, because nobody else would really understand that, because they think you're whining and crying. So you really don't go around and talk about that. You just have to find players who have done it, who have made that transition, and how do you handle yourself? Like you said, trying to figure out, who am I? And that's the one thing after going through that experience, there's not a prideful bone in my body at this point, because I remember going into restaurants and never having to pay for my food. And then after I finished playing, I had to pay for my own food. What kind of craziness is that?
I never would have even thought about stuff like that. Like this, all the privileges, the status, the privileges. Oh. So let me go back in time. How long? Then you talk about your years in the league, but there's always the years before the league. So for you, when did you start playing football?
7 years old.
Wow.
And played baseball, basketball, football every year, and had a year of karate in there too.
So when did when did football became the dominant sport?
Actually, I was a pretty good basketball player and baseball. I just decided in high school, my senior year, I wanted to just kind of focus on football, and so I knew where I wanted to go to school. I always wanted to go to the University of North Carolina.
Okay.
No other place I really wanted to go.
Even though they wasn't a football thing, it was still UNC. Okay.
Still UNC. And so I went to a little 1A school. When I graduated high school, I was 6'1", about 215 pounds. And so I was actually a walk-on at Carolina.
Okay.
And after my second year, they put me on full scholarship. I'd grown from 6'1" to 6'6", 295.
In college.
I moved from an outside linebacker to a defensive lineman. And that was it. And so that was a blessing, obviously. But
is that genetics? Like, are the other men in your family?
Oh yeah, my dad is 6'1". I got a brother who's 6'7". And my older brother is 6'4".
Okay.
So everybody in my family is over 6 feet. My mom is the short one in the house.
So you're walking. So you didn't go to college thinking pro football.
No.
When in that college career, it's like, wait a minute, I can play pro. When did it happen?
Probably my junior and senior year, but I still wasn't even. I wasn't drafted when I came out of college. I went in as a free agent. New England called the day of the draft and said, "We want you to come in." And so at that time, I had already had my interview with the Secret Service. I was going into the Secret Service. I was a double major in political science and sociology. I'd gone to Charlotte, filled out my application, met some of the the agents there. I was fortunate because at the time President Clinton came to our school and spoke at our school, but they used our field house as his staging area.
Okay.
I got a chance to kind of meet some of his men and just be around that whole atmosphere. That was it for me. And so I went into camp with no expectation of making the team. So I played very loose and very crazy, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
I fought all the time. I remember Parcells saying, my position coach name was Romeo Cornell. We called him Rack. He said, Rack, you only got one defensive lineman on your team that's gonna fight, and that's that Barnett. I was fighting every day.
So do you think, though, in some ways that was an advantage? Because I'm just thinking, if you were not preparing to go to the league, you had to focus on your education.
Most definitely.
Whereas you have somebody who's coming to college thinking, I'm going pro, this is just something I got to do to get where I'm ultimately going, because I can imagine that probably worked to your advantage. So how important is the student part of being the student athlete?
It is so important. It is hugely important, because especially now, because they're putting new rules and regulations about grades and who can play and who can't play. And so that student athlete part of it is extremely important. And schools are really cracking down on that and making sure that players are, making sure they get their education. And they're also, putting things in place that some schools allow you to come back free of charge if you don't finish your degree. So there are things being put in place to do that. Hang on. Excuse me. So, but the players themselves have to really take advantage of that. And that's what I did, because every summer we were there working out anyway.
Okay.
So you take some classes to get ahead. So that's why I double majored in political science and sociology. So that was, extremely important.
What were your career aspirations, political science and sociology? What were you? I know you mentioned Secret Service, but what were your career aspirations?
I wanted to go law enforcement, some high level law enforcement. And my advisor said, you don't want to do criminal justice because you kind of pigeonhole yourself. Mm-hmm. So they told me to double major. That way I could go into law if I chose to. Okay. So that was the path I chose. But yeah, you have to take advantage of it.
Should college athletes get paid?
I say yes.
Okay.
But the problem that has happened now with the whole portal, you've introduced a whole new element now to where kids behind the scenes can be promised NIL money if they transfer from one school to the other.
Okay.
You basically introduce free agency at the college level. And so now players can transfer and go to another school and play, and you can't stop them.
And it's no longer a waiting period. They don't have to sit out. They play immediately. Okay.
Yeah. And if, you got these donors and these big school donors who could call under the, behind the scenes.
Right.
Hey, come here. I got this dealership. We can give you.
All the stuff that was illegal is now legal.
That's correct. So that's the only thing that scares me about that is it's just a different element. But when you think about the time and the energy that goes into that, yeah. One of my projects I think I did in college was I did an analysis on how much a school makes on a Saturday alone. And when I started looking at the numbers, they make anywhere between $7.5 to $8 million every Saturday at the university. That's just concessions,
right?
And people coming into the city. That's not including all the other apparel and things that go with it. And they're making it off of guys who are out there on the field. So yeah, I would now these guys really now have to know how to manage money. You
Mm-hmm.
know, they got to know how to pay taxes, and so it's just introducing a whole new level of complexity. But I'm hoping these colleges have plans in place to, um, to kind of help combat that so they don't get themselves in trouble. But
Because even for you, did you find yourself as the starving student? I mean, like, yeah, you got free meals, but you couldn't get a haircut or you couldn't get a pizza, you couldn't go out on a date. I mean, the struggles we hear, like, was it that hard?
it was difficult a little. There were times because I had an older brother who was in college at the time
Okay.
um, at A&T, and there were times where it got pretty rough. But all your food was taken care of, your books was taken care of. Everybody on the team had every team had somebody who cuts hair.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So you would always kind of get that stuff done. But I remember um, and I was dating my wife at the time because I met Tiff at Carolina, and we could take $5, go to the dollar movie theater. That's $2. We would get a bacon double cheeseburger from Wendy's, a junior bacon cheeseburger from Wendy's, which was $1, and then we would split a large fry and split a drink. You talking about a
So
six
she been
dollar
ride or
meal?
die from the gate. I mean, you.
So that was a $6 date. I mean,
Well, you had a winner. If nothing else, if you can go out on a $6 date, you got to be special.
I'm telling you, like you found a way. You found a way. And then they would give us, snacks at night, and I would go load up, bring
Mm-hmm.
sandwiches, things home. But no, I can't say I was a struggling athlete.
Okay.
But there were times things got a little hard, but you dealt with it. And back then, you could get $5 out of the teller machine. You can't do that no more.
Right. So, so with your brothers being, I guess athletic build, did your dad or your parents push you into sports? And what is the balance? You want to encourage it, you want to promote it, but some parents almost come obsessed, and it almost becomes their dream and agenda more so than the child. Where's that balance between, okay, I encourage it, there's the discipline and camaraderie, the benefits of being an athlete, yes, there's some scholarship money, to get to school, but you see these parents who attack coaches and attack, the referees and umpires, and they just become so, you're gonna make it, as if there's no other path for their child.
Right.
How do you, what advice would you give to a mother or father that say, okay, maybe you need to ease up a little bit, or you're at the right level? Is there a litmus test to know when they're going overboard or when it's kind of just right?
Yeah. Anytime you get to a place where you're ready to fight somebody over a game, I think you pretty much crossed that path at that point.
Okay.
And sports is just competitive across the board. And so my advice for parents is probably not to put their kids in so much sports so early.
Okay.
'Cause I think you kind of wear and tear their body a lot sooner than what should be. You're still growing at 7 and 8 years old, and you're still taking these punishments and hits. Maybe start a little later, do more training and stretching, because that is extremely important. Than the physical side of that is the care after the sport that really kind of gives you the ability to kind of bounce back. So, but they have to remember it's a game. But listen, my daughters play high school basketball, and listen, we got one game. We were so rowdy. Me and my wife almost got thrown out.
Oh no, pacify that they called the
Oh my
police.
God, I'm telling you, me and Lady Barnett, we was going off in there, and my wife, to see my wife, who was just like, she didn't like sports at all, but to see her so aggressive and be like, "Who's he talking to? Is he talking to us?" I was like, "Yeah, he's talking to us. He gonna throw us out of here."
So this is a point blank. It might be a hard question for a former NFL player to answer, but seeing the CTE, seeing that some of your fellow players in the league almost cripple post retirement, Is it worth it?
Every player will tell you yes.
Okay.
Every player will tell you yes.
But whether it's 1
Family,
year, 5 years, 10 years, it's worth it.
every player will tell you yes, because you're part of a 0.001% that actually got a chance to play in the NFL. Your family members may tell you no, but as an athlete who has put the time, the energy in, the sacrifice, the eating right, doing everything that you needed to do to get that chance to get to that level, yeah, they'll say it's worth it. But that's whole CTE, it's very scary. Because at this point, the only way they know you have it is if they operate on you after you pass away.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. And so you can't really detect it. You may look at markers right now, but you really can't really confirm it until that person has passed away. And so it's a very, and no matter what you do, unfortunately, the game is a very violent game.
Right, by nature.
With all kind of rules and regulations in there. Don't use your head and tackle right. But it's a violent game, and you got guys 325 pounds running 4.8, 4.9 40s coming at you full speed. I mean,
right, repeatedly,
repeatedly, over
right.
and over again. So it's just a violent game. But to the NFL's credit, and even the last collective bargaining agreement, they put things in place for former players, even like myself, to take advantage of when it comes to your health and your welfare. Things that the NFL is paying for former players to get tested,
Okay.
long-term disability. There are multiple things you can take advantage of that wasn't there before.
So that 0.00, how many zeros? 0.001?
0.0001%. Yeah.
So even to a parent we were talking about earlier in terms of pushing your kid, the reality is 0.0001% will actually make it. So you almost have to prepare your child for some other life or career, because the statistics show it's not very likely that your child is going to make it to play at a professional level.
That's correct. About 1 million. They looked at 1 million players that come out of high school that want to go to college to play. About 100,000 actually get a chance to do it. Of that 100,000, only 1,360 get a chance to play in the NFL.
And then when you start getting into the duration of how long you play, it could be a very short turnaround time too.
Oh, most definitely. 60% are done in less than 3 years. Another 15% is done in less than 5 years. Only like 5% get a chance to play that Tom Brady 10 plus years. But you don't hear about
due to injuries.
No,
is that due to injuries?
It's the nature of the game.
Okay.
It's a business, because every year you really fighting for your job again, because there's somebody coming out of college faster, stronger than you, and can take your spot. I mean, when you get cut from the NFL, your salary stops. NFL is the only sport that does not have guaranteed contracts, like baseball or hockey or basketball. Their contracts are guaranteed. Football is not. So that's why you see a lot of players sometimes getting these guaranteed contracts, getting them money up front, because they know if they get hurt, they get nothing.
And is that because they know that from an owner standpoint, I'm not going to guarantee the money because I know you're going to get hurt? But as a player, you want the guaranteed money because you know it's very likely you will.
Exactly. So that's why you see a lot of players want the money up front, or at least guaranteed.
Yeah. So you said you were not drafted. You were a walk-on. Do you remember when you got the call that said, hey, we want you to join?
Yeah. I remember coming into last day of cuts. So you come into normally when you get ready to get cut, there's a guy, the player program guy, standing at the door. If you make it past him, you're good. So I was walking into the stadium because we had broke camp, and he was standing at the door, and he said, "What's going on, Barnett?" I was like, "Okay." He's like, "Have a good day." I was like, "All right." I kept on walking.
But you expected him to say, "Don't come in."
Yeah, bring me a playbook. Coach wants to see you.
So what do you do then? Do you like run around the field like I made it? I made it. Like what do you do?
I remember riding to practice because we had to go actually before New England built this beautiful stadium.
Mm-hmm.
We actually had to get in our cars and drive to a practice field about 2 miles away. I remember being in the car with some veterans because I didn't know where I was going. And they said, "You made it." I said, "I did, huh?" Not only did you make it, you made the 53-man roster, which means I'm not on practice squad. So I was full time. And come to find out, they cut a 10-year veteran and a 3rd-round draft pick to keep me on the active roster.
And this was the Bill Parcells New England Patriots.
That is correct. And he's the one that gave me the nickname Laptop.
But how did he know? I mean, I know every time I see you on a laptop, but what was he talking about back then?
Because every summer, because I was working in IT.
Got you. Okay.
And he came in one day. I was sitting in his office with his secretary fixing his computer.
You keep in touch with him?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I do.
So,
I do. So I actually called him not too long ago for his birthday. Wish him a happy birthday.
So you were in the pre-Brady Belichick Patriots.
Correct. So Belichick, my last year when I went to Washington, was a defensive coordinator, and Brady was just coming in.
So you've experienced the New England Patriots and the Washington Redskins. How important, well, teams are teams, but was there a contrast in the culture of the teams? And when you talk about culture, and I want to draw the parallel even to the church, Pastor Eric McNair and Pastor Jay Patrick, they emphasize culture is almost the most important thing to the success and vitality of any organization. Was there a contrast in culture? And
yes,
who establishes that culture? Is it the general manager? Is it the coach? Is it key players? Is it the owner? Who sets that tone?
The head coach and the senior players.
Okay.
The veterans, they kind of set the culture of, and Parcells was a hard-nosed guy. Mm-hmm. What you saw and how he carried himself, even in dealing with the media, that's how he was with us. So okay. He was not faking. That's just how hard he was. He was very difficult. And we had some, early in the year, we had practices, man. We were out there at each other, even though we had to play a game on Sunday, but we was out there going after each other because that's the culture he was building, was of a hard-nosed football team. And you had some teams out on the West Coast who didn't put pads on anymore after they broke camp. Everything they did was in shorts. And so you go to DG, so there's a difference in dichotomies when it comes to, who, the teams that you go to. So that culture was huge. And I think that culture that they instilled, with Belichick being under Parcells, he just carried it over and took it to a whole new level. But that they set the tone, and you knew what to expect. They didn't play, and they didn't hold any punches. I mean,
I look at two teams. You take New England historically had not been a winning franchise. They had the Super Bowl run against the Bears, but historically had not. But over the last 20 years, the most successful franchise. Mm-hmm. The Redskins, on the other hand, had been a winning franchise. But then over the last 25 years, they had a couple playoff appearances, but never really a title contender. And it makes you wonder, the Patriots, Kraft comes in as the owner. It's almost like things change. Snyder comes in with the Redskins, things change. So it makes you wonder, is it the owner? Is it the general managers, the coaches, the key players? And then the parallel to the church, who sets the culture in the church? We can't draft, we can't trade, we can't cut. We might want to.
I wonder what would happen if we could do that. And just have an apostolic draft board and just put key players out there and just from every church and just say, who you drafted in the first round, Travis? Well, I think I need a good deacon, so I'm gonna come to your church and I'm gonna draft one of your deacons in the first round.
And this one needs to go.
I'm putting them on trading block.
So how? I mean, we're going to get into a few minutes as pastor, but how do you establish culture?
Doc, it has to be according to look at what God did for Moses. He couldn't do it all by himself.
Mm-hmm.
So the Bible says he told him to choose 70 people that would help them, help him. And he took off of Moses' spirit and put it on the 70. He didn't give them the spirit of God. He gave them the spirit from Moses because he knew they were going to have to work with Moses. And so that Moses would not have an issue when he needed his leaders to work for him or to do certain things. We as pastors have to really teach and really get the members to understand that they have to catch the spirit of their spiritual leader. You know me. I'm open. I like to laugh. I like to have a good time. I am the complete opposite of Apostle Kennedy. Even though Apostle Kennedy has a great sense of humor, and if you sit down and you talk to him, he'll have you cracking up. Mm-hmm. But our styles are completely different. Mm-hmm. And so that part of that transition is still underway, so to speak, because there's some that get it and there's some that are still to the left when it comes to their mentality. And so you have to, if your church is going to be successful, you have to really surround yourself with people who God allows to catch your spirit and your mentality, because it makes it easy to work with them. So
do you have to focus on team building? Like, do you have to, like teams, you get a group of people together, okay, y'all got, spring training camp, like it's intentional to try to build camaraderie, culture, the tone. Do you think sometimes the church is too passive or not taking intentional steps or programmatic steps to establish culture? We just kind of hope that it's going to happen.
Yeah, we don't do a good job of that because the church is the only institution where we don't fire nobody.
Can we, or we just don't?
We don't.
But we can.
Well, you can. But what happens when that person leaves and you fire them, and so now they talk about you.
Right.
Now they cause issues. Not being able, and that becomes a difficult situation when it comes to the leaders of a ministry, because you may be trying to take the ministry to another level from a technology perspective, from a process perspective, from a financial perspective. But if you have people who are in your leadership position who don't catch that vision and they want to stay stuck in where they are, and you can try to bring them up, show them your vision, articulate it, give it to them over and over again. But if they choose not to move forward because they like where they are because of age or position or whatever, what do you do?
And see, where a pro team could just clearly clean house.
Clean house.
Like, if you don't want to play this style or play under this culture, fine. We'll just get rid of you. We'll bring in the people that embrace our style of play. And then I think in sports, it's a clear vision. We want to win, and we understand what winning and losing looks like. In the church, yes, we want soul saved, but I think sometimes, like you said, articulating the vision, what does a winning church look like? And for every church, it may not be mega ministry, but what does a successful ministry look like in 2022? And I think sometimes we have a hard time, understanding from God what our assignment is, but then also articulating that to our members as to, okay, this is what God has strategically placed us in this community to do, which may not be like other ministries, because God doesn't need us to be a replica. He has created us for a unique assignment, but it just makes me think about in pro sports, every team opening day, the goal is what? Make the playoffs, win the Super Bowl. In the church, if you go to church Sunday and ask, what is the goal of this church this Sunday? I would almost guarantee you're going to get a variety of answers.
And that's the problem. And that's the situation that we have to find a way to overcome, because I see the same similarities when it comes to sports. Our job is to win souls. How do we go out and win souls? You know, we can't do things the same way we used to. We can't push paper no more. We've got to use the technology that we have out there. We've got to we not only do we got to use Facebooks and the kind of mediums that we have, but we also got to put programs in place that show the community that we're doing more than just trying to preach and try to receive offerings. And so you have to have people who are like-minded, who are willing to make those sacrifices to do that. But if you have, depending on your makeup of your church and the age of the individuals in your church, sometimes that becomes very difficult because they're just not willing to make that transition. And again, how do you say, you know what? We need to get to another level. And unfortunately, your skill set doesn't allow us to do that. So I'm going to have to replace you. What kind of conversation is that? You know, I mean,
now corporate America happens all the time. In pro sports, all the time. But in the church, we'll keep a person in a position for 50 years, knowing that they're not qualified, just to preserve their feelings.
Correct. And meanwhile,
so do you let the whole ship sink because of one person?
We shouldn't, but God says all souls belong to me. And as pastors, when we make that call, we make that decision, we have to do it in such a manner that it doesn't cause a split when it comes to the church, because people can take that and run with it. And you have to be focused on what did God tell you to do in your vineyard. You can't compare yourself to another church, because, as you said, what does success look like? Success may not be a mega church. Success may not be, multiple ministries.
Right.
You know, it's whatever God has said for your church. This is what success looks like. And if the pastor can get that vision and understand what that is, and then get the people to buy into that, you can move mountains.
So even if we can't fire and trade people, I mean, sometimes that'd be a nice option. And we pray that God sends in people buy into the vision. But I imagine you've seen coaches reassign players. You know, I see your strengths, I see your weaknesses. You've seen quarterbacks become receivers, and you see where, okay, we're going to change you from offense to defense. So even if we can't release you, can we do a better job of reassigning and even allow and people being receptive to reassignment? Like, you're valuable to the team. We want you on the team, but we think this position would suit you better. Is that an option for us?
It's an option for us, but it isn't an option for the person that we're trying to do the transition on, because they will take that as a negative thing.
Okay.
And they could cause more problems in your ministry than you think, because you know how that phone is.
Because they see a reassignment as a demotion or as a termination.
Exactly.
Whereas in the league, oh, well, they would almost see it as thank you for wanting to keep me, rather than, either you could have traded me or got rid of me. I appreciate you willing to work with me and trying to match my skill set with a different position. Whereas in the church, it's more, they take it more personal.
It's taken very personal. And, people will be on the phone. Can you believe what Pastor Barnett did? I've been in this church for 25 years, and he gonna try to tell me how he ain't but 50 himself. How he gonna tell? So you already know what that conversation is gonna be like. But the crazy thing is, Bishop, is that we see in the scriptures that God says some 30, some 60, some 90. You, based off your skill set, just give what you can. And no matter what you give, if you give your 30, to God is just as like somebody gave 90 that's required of them. So God doesn't judge based off of what we give from a 30, 60, 90 perspective. He judges based off of, are you doing what I ask you to do? Too much is given, much is required. So if I have a lot and I have a good skill set, God's requiring me to do a lot. But he's not judging me as being better than anybody else who can only do 30% or 20%, as long as they're doing what God has called them to do. But we see it as because of our feelings and our emotional direction, sometimes we see it as being negative. And one thing I told the church on Tuesday, I said, we don't see with our eyes. Mm-hmm. We see with our emotions. Because based off how I see you, Bishop Travis, when you do something, when I see you do something, my emotions will tell me how should I interpret what you just did.
Right. You got dirty glasses. Right. So it's going to jade your vision. Absolutely.
Right. If I'm mad at you, no matter what you do,
right,
I see you, I'm gonna be mad at you.
Right.
But if I love you and I appreciate you, no matter what you do, I'm gonna be looking at you like, that's my brother. He's got a reason for what he's doing. I'm gonna support him. But how we see you is is that emotional side, and that's hard to sometimes deal with when we deal with people.
So you mentioned about 50 and older people, and that made me think about like a Bill Parcells can walk into a locker room, and his resume and his aura speaks for itself. Like he knows what he's doing. You need to listen to him. But I thought about like even was it a McVay that took the Rams, one of the youngest coaches, in the league, in league history. How is he able to get a team to buy into a vision when he doesn't have the same resume? I mean, I think he grew up around the league, but maybe for a young pastor that says, I don't have the cliche, I don't have the resume, I don't have the wins and losses. How can a young pastor establish that winning culture or get buy-in when it's almost like, well, who are you, to even get this job in the first place?
Your energy level and your sacrifice. Because no matter what people think, they can always see that. The energy that you put in, the time that you put in, the preparation that you put in, the support that you put in, all that does play into people really respecting the position that you have. One thing about when I see McVay, I see a very high energy guy, very energetic, connects with players, connects with, articulating the vision that he has for the team. And when you got your leaders also buying into that, that trickles down to everybody who comes in. That's why, you've seen guys who seem to be headaches in the league can go to a New England and almost have a second chance at a career. That culture embraces, that those type individuals. But when you put that structure in place, everybody's buying into that structure. And churches, if we could ever tap into that mentality of really supporting the leader and not judging everything that they do, to the point where we're looking for something to be wrong. We're human. We're not going to dot every I and cross every T. No. So if you think, and if we did do that, that means you'd be putting me in a position of God, and then God's going to have a problem with me, because he's not going to have nobody have more show more attention than our love for him. And I don't want to ever be in that position. But we put pastors in a position, in a place sometimes like they're God on earth, and we're just under shepherds. We got to answer to God just like everybody else. And if not, so I think we have a harder way to go, because not only does he say we can preach and teach, and if people can be saved, then turn around and tell us, I don't know you. That's but
wow.
God, your name. I taught in your name, Lord. I preached in your name. I said, yeah, that was my name. My obligation is to verify and to lift up my name, not yours. And so we can preach and teach, and people get saved, get delivered, get baptized, and live lives in a great relationship with God, and then turn around for the spiritual leader and say, I never knew you.
Wow. Somebody needs to like, invite, share, tag, comment, subscribe right now. This interview is good. We only have a few more minutes left, but I even thought about when you talk about a McVay versus a Parcells. Even though their style is different, they both have achieved success. And it lets you know that even though personalities can different, styles can differ, it's not just one pattern or personality or path to success. So you might have one pastor that's more serious, another pastor who's a little bit more, laid back, joking. But, it doesn't mean you got to be exactly like the other person in order to be successful.
So true. So true. You got to be yourself, and you got to be who God has made you to be. And you can't try to mimic somebody else's style. You can't preach like somebody else. You can't teach like somebody else. You got to teach and preach and administer and administrate based on how God leads you. And you take the foundational things and you take the things that you've seen be successful, and you try to find ways to take it to the next level and to improve and to continue to have the church be a vital part of the community. And so, every team has different, you know, players and different backgrounds, but they come together when they unite on a common goal, and they make the sacrifices, they push themselves, they sweat together, they fight together, they do everything to reach that goal. Now, how much stronger would our churches be if we had that same mentality, that refuge, or city refuge, or in your ministry, everybody was in alignment with the vision and the direction, and you didn't allow outside people to come in to derail the vision or the direction that's been given by the spiritual leader. But sometimes we're treated like, it's almost like another player calling from another team and you telling them what y'all gonna run over the weekend.
Right.
We'll listen to people from outside of our ministry talk about the ministry and won't stand up for the ministry. It's like it's your teammate. You don't talk. You don't do stuff like that.
And what happens in the locker room stays in the locker room.
Exactly. You don't go outside and try to destroy nobody, and you never talk about the things that happen in the locker room. That's breaking all kind of codes. That'll get you into some serious trouble. And so the conversations that are talked about in the locker room,
Right.
that stuff stays in the locker room, and you support one another. And and so for me, sometimes that gets very, I get upset sometimes when that mentality is broken. And when it comes to the church, when you're making, and people don't realize that pastors got feelings.
Mm-hmm.
We're not machines, we're not machines. And I've just been fortunate to have, even in this transition, some people who have just, been there and supporting and fighting for the success of the ministry, and fighting for the success of my leadership. And that's invaluable. Honestly, it is, and I appreciate that. And we're talking about somebody taking over for Apostle Leroy H. Kennedy.
Right.
This is like, come on, man.
Right.
How much harder could it be? I mean, how much harder can it be? All eyes, it's like everything I do is under the microscope.
That's where I want to go next. And I thought about first what you said about the comparison. I can imagine, I get frustrated, but I can only imagine your frustration of having played professional sports at the highest level and understanding the locker room code and buy-in and vision, and then the frustration of seeing Holy Ghost filled, sanctified people act worse than people that don't know God, but they understand the ethics code of the locker room. I can only imagine, like, I cannot believe I didn't experience this in the league with heathens, and I'm here with y'all saints, and y'all can't behave. I can only imagine you like, what in the world?
I'm telling you, because you feel like in the locker room, I mean, like you said, individuals who ain't thinking about God, you know. But when you come into that facility, you're brothers,
Mm-hmm. Automatic.
automatic.
Mm-hmm.
You're brothers, and they would go above and beyond to do anything they could to make sure you were successful. And you don't hear anybody running anybody down outside of the locker room. You don't hear a receiver talking about his quarterback. You don't hear a running back talking about the coach. Those things don't happen
Why?
because they know words matter.
Okay.
Life, even though they don't use scriptures, they know life and death is in the power of the tongue. Their success is based off having a good working relationship and having camaraderie and fighting for the same thing. And so, even though they may not have that church or that Bible mentality, they still exhibit the principles that we're supposed to live by when it comes to our church and when it comes to the ministry. And so it is frustrating sometimes, but there's enough people who are buying in that keeps you excited about what's getting ready to happen and what's coming. Because the more people that buy into that, the more successful we're going to be, and any pastor would be. But that meant that people don't, I mean, and that's why God spends so much time talking about keeping good relationships, you know, because he understands there's power when people come together for success. You know, they came together for evil when they were trying to build a tower to Babel.
Right. Right.
So the church, you know, I've even had this conversation with other pastors, and I said, could you imagine if the apostolic church came together like the Catholic Church?
That's it. That's it. That's it.
Have our own city, our own zip code, our own way of doing things. We could set the world on. We could turn the world upside down.
And
But
even when it comes to electing our leaders, we're not going to leave this room until we're unanimous. Like, we will still be in the room.
still be in the room. Well, look what happened in Acts when they figured out who the next disciple was going to be. Nobody came out and was mad because they didn't get chosen as that 12th disciple. Then what happened? The Holy Ghost falls. Why? Because they were on one room with one accord. So God gives us the principle right in the scriptures. You know, if we could, you know, stay together, even if you're not you're not chosen, you're still part of the body, and that's still important.
So, as you mentioned, you are the successor to the living legend, Apostle Leroy H. Kennedy, founder of Refuge Way of the Cross Church, pastor of the church
Thanks,
at the
Travis.
time was, huh?
Thanks, Travis. Living legend. Appreciate that.
50. He had pastored for 58 years at the time. He will be 100 next month, and he served as the presiding bishop of the Way of the Cross Church of Christ International for 30 years. I wanted to go back to your call to preach and all that. I want to actually start here. How did you end up at Refuge? And when did you know he was even thinking about not only retiring, but making you his successor?
Let's go back to when I came from, I was working at Reebok for 10 years, and I got recruited to come to Under Armour. A headhunter found me and wanted me to come to Under Armour, and I spent 10 years there. And one of the things I've always wanted to do when I came here as a young guy was I wanted to be under somebody who was seasoned, who could teach, that I could learn from. So when I came to the city, I went to a few different places to try to find that church home for my family. I was here in the city about 6 months before I even found my family even came down. And so I spent that time, you know, obviously trying to find a home in a church to attend. And it was on a Wednesday night after just doing some research. And I, you know, doing, you know, websites or, you know, just getting, you know, people that was just becoming pretty popular at the time. And there was something about seeing him and Mother Kennedy. I said, oh, I'm going to go visit that church.
Mm.
And so I came in on a Wednesday night in prayer. And if you knew the way Refuge used to be, had a little prayer room downstairs by the steps. And so I think it was Sister Holly I met when I first came, when I came to the church. And she, showed me how to get into the church. And here I am, 6'6", 300 pounds, and I'm coming in. I just get on my knees and start praying. I think Deacon Persons got up and was like looking at me like, who's this dude coming in here? And so, after prayer, they asked me who I was, and I told them where I was and where I was coming from. And they asked me, was I a minister? At the time I was, and I said yes. And I said, I'll be back, and came back that Sunday, and God said, this is where I want you. I want you to learn. He said, your job is to help Apostle Kennedy, whatever, Bishop Kennedy, whatever he wants you to do, that's what you do. And, so I said, okay. And there were a couple things that from a doctrine perspective that was new to me that I hadn't experienced before. But God said, this is where you need to be. I was like, oh, all right.
But you were apostolic, but there were some variations.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Exactly. Okay. Exactly. And so I had no desire or passion or push to say you need to be a pastor. Mm-hmm. I remember when I went back to school to get my MBA from the University of Maryland, I remember telling the ministry, I'm going to finish my MBA. I'm not going to be around very much. I'm going to be studying to get this done. It's an accelerated program. I'm going to be gone Wednesday. I'm going to be gone Friday and Saturday for the next 18 months. Mm-hmm. So I'm not going to be here.
Right.
But this is when we had ministered. Everybody was in place.
Like Friday night service. Yeah. Right? Saturday events. Yeah.
I'm good. I'm gone. My desire was to start my own technology company, be on the cover of Black Enterprise.
Speaking, it's still on the horizon.
It's impossible. But that was my plan and that was my desire. But over the course of time, things happen. And when Apostle Kennedy first approached me, I said, no, you need to stay. I want you to stay in place. I said, I'm not going anywhere. My job is, when God sent me here, was to support you. And that's what I'm going to do.
Well, not to get too into it, what is it? I want you to be my assistant, or I'm retiring and I want you to be the pastor.
He wants me to be the pastor. I want you to be the pastor. And I'm like, Bishop, there's nothing wrong with you. You be the pastor. Mm-hmm. I just want to be here to support you. I'm not going anywhere. I have no aspirations, to lead a church. That's, I'm good. I want to support you. And it goes back to what I said earlier. It's hard for a person to leave 30 years in leadership, 60 years in leadership, and turn that over. And now Apostle Kennedy will even tell you that when he made that transition, it was difficult for him too. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And so that's why I kind of wanted him to stay in place. From that point on, he just made decisions without telling me. He's just like, the day that he announced me as being a pastor, he just did that from the pulpit. He called me up there, said, here's the new pastor. Called my wife up there, my kids. I'm like,
so you hadn't consented. So you can't, if God sent you there to help the man, and the man said you the pastor, you can't say no in front of everybody. I guess I'm it.
Right. One Sunday morning, he was sitting in, he has the middle chair. He gets up. I'm giving up my middle chair and made me move over to sit in his chair. I'm like, Bishop, what are you doing? Like, now go back to people.
Right. Right.
You know how that looked.
Right. But he did it.
It don't matter.
Wow.
The flack and the stuff that was said about that.
Wow.
Again, I'm following Apostle Kennedy.
Right.
This is, people don't understand. This is Apostle Kennedy. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so anything that is seen as displacing him or moving him, or some people say silencing him, I mean, I heard it all. And I had to deal with that. And I didn't make these decisions. He was making these decisions as God led him. And I can't argue with him. And so I wanted to support him and do what, he needed me to do. But that whole thing, Doc, it was just.
And I applaud him because I think it took being spirit led for him to even make the transition. If he couldn't do it in his own strength, but when God led him to do certain things, if I don't do this when God tells me, I may not have the strength to do it later. So as God said, all right, make him the pastor today. Well, if I wait till next week, I might change my mind and mess everything up. So, okay, God said it, I'm going to do it. Okay, give him your seat. All right. That's what the Lord says. I'm going to do it, because if he allowed humanity to kick in, he may not ever got around to it. So my question then to follow up to that, and I think you've already alluded to this, it's rare to have a living predecessor in the apostolic church. That is not the pattern for how it is done. So what has been the advantage and the disadvantage of having a living predecessor? So would it have been better to take the seat after he's gone, or to have him put you in his seat?
It's hard to say, Doc, but I would say the advantage is his wisdom, his mentality. I've learned so much from him just by watching him. And when he tells you that there's nobody in the world I have anything against, he knows that. He does not carry a grudge. He does not. He will cover for you as much as possible. I mean, he is just a very unique individual. And just learning from him and bouncing things off of him and asking him how he handles certain situations without, coming outside of himself, and his mentality has just been awesome.
And that's even now at 99, he's still providing that to you. Wow. And this is how long have you been pastor? It's over 5 years.
Yeah, it'll be 6 years this year.
So you've benefited 6 years of having under his tutelage, but then you had the pandemic. So I can only imagine the complexity of being a successor. Pandemic hits, everything goes, the whole world goes haywire, and you're like, I guess, was it a good thing he gave it off to you so he didn't have to deal with it? Or you're like, look,
not only that, we're trying to build a church.
Right. You're in a building campaign.
Right. And I would tell any of your people who are out there watching, if you got multiple elders and ministers, if you got multiple assistant pastors, make sure they're all on the same page and they understand what is the structure of the church. I'm not talking about preaching and teaching. As you know, Bishop Travis, preaching and teaching is probably the least of what we do.
Right. When
it comes to really understanding the financial infrastructure and the makeup of the church and the different things that are out there that you have to now control and be over, it was overwhelming for me because there was no transition. And Apostle Candy had done a great job of just assuming and buying property in the area. And we had businesses in place that I had no idea how they were operating.
Okay. It wasn't just a church; it was a whole enterprise.
Yeah, it did. Yeah. We had an assisted living facility. We have an 8-unit low-income housing. We had property up and down the street, empty lots. And so Apostle Candy did a great job of the structure, but he had individuals who were kind of handling the day-to-day. So he focused on preaching and teaching. So when I came in and really trying to understand like what was happening, I really had to lean on our CFO, Deacon Wendell, Sister Vivian, Deacon Persons, Sister Kia. I had to lean on individuals just like, what's happening here? Where's all this, all these little parts and pieces? And through that whole process, man, we found out some things that were in place that should not have been in place. Some things
good and bad, right?
Yeah. And it was like, we spent a long time just getting out of the past. You know, we had individuals outside of the church that was managing those properties, and they were stealing from the church, and it was just, let's just say my MBA was used to kind of get us back to a better place. It
So
wasn't.
what lesson would you share with a pastor who's thinking about, for both angles? You're the leader, you get ready to transition to your successor, but also someone who is the successor, get ready to come in. What would you say is the biggest takeaway from your transition? That if there is a current leader or a identified successor watching, what would you want them to know?
Get in the footsteps of your leader while he is around, and get him to pour into you, not just from the spiritual side, but also from the financial side, and really understand the makeup of that ministry and how things are running. Um, because God does tell us to be good stewards
Mm-hmm.
and not to be slothful in business.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's a responsibility when it comes to how we manage
Mm-hmm.
the resources that God brings in. And we're going to be accountable for that. But the people see preaching and teaching, but that's
Right.
such a small part of the responsibility of a spiritual leader. And then on top of that, having to deal with people personalities.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Then on top of that, the pastor has a full-time job. He has a family. He has kids, and not to mention if they're going to school. So I'm trying to get an infrastructure in place. I'm
Mm-hmm.
getting my MBA. I have a full-time job, and I'm married with children. And so that transition was pretty painful.
So you had a plate full, and then you add on a church and everything that comes with it.
I'm just going to say this. I'm following Apostle.
So you got the whole organization looking at you like, all right, what that
Thank
Barnett gonna
you.
do?
Exactly. What are you going to do now?
What he gonna do? What he gonna do?
It's
What he
all
gonna
fun and
do?
games. It's all fun and games. You were sitting on the side. Now you in the chair. What you going to do?
I know it's an extreme honor, but I know it has to be. There are days where it seems more like I won't say a curse, but it's got to be seem like it's more of a punishment than a blessing. Like, Lord, why you add this to my?
If the ministry is not successful, whose fault is it going to be? If the church doesn't get built, whose fault is it going to be?
So who? So wow, I don't want to get too personal, but I imagine you met your wife in college, but God knew even in college that He was giving you somebody that was suited for the task years down the road. How instrumental from the $5 date night all the way to now. All right, I got your back. Even as pastor, corporate executive, MBA student, father of 2 daughters. How instrumental has your wife been in all of this? From moving from the league, from being the walk on to getting traded, to getting, I guess, released, to moving from Baltimore, that 5-year transition where there was financial difficulty, then moving to Baltimore, becoming an associate minister. Now you're the pastor. Here's your chance. What would you want to say about your wife and the importance of maybe some young man is here, doesn't know where God's going to take him? But what advice would you give that young man about the importance of selecting the right mate for the long haul, even though you don't know where that destination ultimately is going to be?
Yeah. Whew. My wife's it's hard to say. It's been invaluable, and that doesn't seem like a big enough word. Because she's seen me in my lowest. She's seen me in my peak. She's seen that part of me that nobody has really seen. And she's lived through a lot of trials, a lot of tribulations, a lot of financial setbacks in making that transition and losing everything when it comes to making that transition from the NFL. I wasn't fortunate enough to have big contracts, and the year I got cut, I had a multi-million-dollar deal on the table, and I got sent to Washington, and so I had a grandmother who was sick, my mother was taking care of, so money was going there. I had a brother who was in college. I was trying to take care of him, so I was doing way too much. And through all of that, my wife supported every decision that I made, even when it put us at a financial loss. She's followed me everywhere God has sent me. She's sacrificed so much when it comes to the ministry, and what she's sacrificing right now as the pastor's wife. Many people don't even can scratch the surface, except for maybe another pastor such as yourself.
And that's
And
probably a conversation right there about succession planning, even for pastors' wives, that we don't even talk about. But
exactly,
she's still
because
behind the legendary Mother Virginia Kennedy.
Virginia Kennedy, like people don't understand. People
Sainted mother. I mean, so once again, but go ahead, Fred. I didn't mean to mess up your flow.
But she's been through so much and supported me through that. And she has her days of frustration. She has her days when she comes in and says, I want to talk to my husband. I want to talk to pastor. I want to talk to my husband. And she has those times where she knows I'm doing a lot, and I often kid you about how much you do. I said, you must just prop yourself up sometimes and take a power nap and keep moving. But I find myself sometimes doing the same thing because I'm just as active. And though I thrive off of that, sometimes it frustrates her because, I'm doing a lot. And she sees that, and she sacrificed, and God has blessed us to where we have kind of, from a financial perspective, recovered, and God has blessed me to do well on my job and in my career. And so that's my queen. And I spoil her to death. Whatever she wants, if it's in my power to give it to her, I'm giving it to her, because she's not once ever come at me or fussed at me or talked about leaving me, despite everything that we went through. And we've had one disagreement that was in our almost 30 years of marriage, or 30 years of being together. And it was on a Sunday morning, and we lived 45 minutes away from church up in Massachusetts. And I was rushing, trying to get out of the house so we can get going. I would say, I said, Tiff, are you ready? And she yelled something about me, or she yelled at me, and like, I'm coming, or something like that. And so we get in the car and we're driving to church. And Tiana, she must have been about maybe 3 or 4 years old. And she says, and it's quiet in the car. And Tiana says, Mommy, are y'all getting a divorce? Broke my wife.
Because they never experienced y'all.
They've never experienced
they can feel the tension in the car.
Yeah, they can feel the tension in the car. And really, that's been the only kind of disagreement we've had. We've talked about a lot of hard things, and we've come to decisions, and we move forward together. And I know she's my ride or die. I know she's got my back, and she's proven that over the years. So yeah, I spoil my wife to death. Whatever's in my power to give her, I'm gonna give it to her, because she's proven that, and she doesn't even ask for a lot. Some of the times I'm the one that's making her get stuff, and she's like, I'm fine. But when as a pastor, having that spouse that's with you spiritually, physically, mentally, psychologically is invaluable. Can't put a price tag on that. And you have to really seek the seek the direction of God when it comes to who you want that spouse to be, because you don't know you don't know where God's going to take you,
Right, right.
but you want somebody that's going to be with you that understands your relationship with God and is going to be there for you. So it's invaluable.
I hope she's watching and hearing you and records this and reminds you. You remember what you
Hey,
said about me?
listen, Mother's Day is coming up, so I'm sure she's already got a list laid out of things that she wants.
Last rapid fire question: what was your favorite stadium to play in?
Oh my gosh. I think for me, it was being in the Cowboy Stadium because I grew up a Cowboys fan.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad is a Cowboys fan. He went to actually spend some time in college with Ed Too Tall Jones. And so we always grew up Dallas fans. So being able to actually walk on that field and be on that star, to me was more sentimental than anything. But it was just that location meant a lot, just to be there for that and know how much my dad was a huge fan. He's a huge fan of the Cowboys. And just to be on that field was to play on the field I grew up watching. It's just.
I can imagine that, and that was a follow-up question to that was, do you remember the first time stepping foot on a major stadium and looking around like, wow, I'm actually here?
Oh yeah. And I think the first game I actually played in, I had a tackle behind the line of scrimmage. I had a sack that first game. And so, I was giddy with excitement.
You ever booed personally? Were you ever booed?
Our defensive line has gotten booed
from your fan
when we didn't play well, but nah.
I was thinking about some of these athletes. Kyrie Irving gave the middle finger to the Boston fans, and you in Boston. So I just wonder, were you ever heckled or really harassed by a fan and just really wanted to go up somebody's head?
No. Even when we lived in Massachusetts, and like I said, New England wasn't a powerhouse. My rookie year, one of my highlights is blocking a field goal against the Bears that allowed us to get into the playoffs my first year. And so whenever we walked around the community, win, lose, or draw, New England fans are New England fans, Doc. They don't waver. I'm telling you, I don't care how bad that the team does, a New England fan is a New England fan, and they are ride or die when it comes to their team. And they're not going to turn on them. They're not going to turn.
Any desire to return to the league as in the front office or in coaching?
One of the things I wanted to go down and do is I wanted to be a player program director. Each team has a player program director that's responsible for making sure players, when they come to the team, know of all the benefits and resources and the things that they can take advantage of while they're in the league that will prepare them for that next step outside of the league. I would love to be able to do something like that, because that would be, being able to shape somebody's life to prepare them for when football is over so they can make that transition easy would be so beneficial. Other than that, I wouldn't mind owning a team.
Now that's I like that. The billionaire that owns the team. and man, my time is up, and I'm going over. What is the one thing the league can do now to have greater diversity in coaching, management, and ownership?
It's kind of I'm not going to say a difficult question, but I've always wanted to be promoted and recognized for my talent, not just my color or my race. But they have to start being more inclusive when it comes to really believing and understanding that African Americans can be head coaches and do well. It goes back to even when we had to break the the barrier when it comes to black quarterbacks because they didn't think black quarterbacks were smart enough to be quarterback. And so we had to break that barrier. But I think if the NFL continues to really put some muscle behind giving African Americans a chance to coach, but not only allowing them to coach, but supporting them as they're coaching and giving them what they need to be successful, you can see that same tide that took us to change the mindset about black quarterbacks can do the same thing when it comes to ownership as well as head coaches. And I would love to see some African-American owners. There's some guys out there that do have the money and can do it. But that group is so tight. Who's going to sell a team? Do you know how much money an NFL team makes? Have you ever heard of an NFL team go bankrupt or going broke?
Even the lousy ones.
Even the lousy. That's what I'm saying. Even the ones that only win 2 games a year. Have you ever heard of an NFL team going broke? No. They make way too much. They make a lot of money, just the owners themselves, when it comes to the teams that they own. And so nobody's really gonna want to sell a cash cow like that. And if you do, you're going to pay a lot of money for it. But so I don't know if there will ever be that mindset of an owner willing to give it up, or they expand the league and let some new owners come in.
Probably the way they would have to do it. Be intentional about who gets awarded an expansion franchise.
Yep, because the television contract, the owners split that money. That billions of dollars goes to the owners. Not to mention the marketing merchandise of the stadium, and the food at the stadiums. And one of the things that reason why even they like the preseason games, because all the money from preseason games goes to the owners. They split that with nobody. So the preseason games, hey, that's gravy.
And then that's a whole nother question about the guaranteed contracts and all that kind of stuff and how much they play. You know, the stars get paid, but I imagine, some of the backup players or the less visible players, you're like, man, I know how many billions you made, and you're only giving me, peanuts compared to the billions. Now, to the average person, it's like, oh man, all that money. But when you look at the percentage compared to what they're making, I can imagine that sometimes like,
Yeah, there's one story. I remember we were on a plane, and when you get on, you fly, you have your own plane when you fly, and they take your coat because you have to dress with sports coat and stuff when you travel. And the stewardess brought my coat back to me, and I said, "This coat look kind of small." And I looked went into the pocket, and I pulled out this wad of money. And I was like, whose coat is this? This ain't my coat. Come to find out, it was the owner's coat. I had Kraft's coat.
Wait a minute, Lil Kraft? I mean, not to be disrespectful, but Lil.
I had Kraft's coat because he had a black and kind of gray houndstooth coat. And it was like mine. They gave me his coat. I was like, this your coat.
You probably did that over one arm. I mean, like,
exactly. I was like, this coat is kind of small.
Wow. Bishop Troy Barnett, it's been an honor just to have this conversation with you. I've thoroughly enjoyed this conversation. I've loved this, learning from you. I admire you tremendously. Just your humility, your intelligence. You're a true friend, a brother, a supporter, an encourager. We're rooting for your success at Refuge and in corporate America and everything that you do. And you have been a friend of our church, since its inception. So it has been an honor to be able to talk with you tonight. We're going to put your Cash App on the screen. I'll get my wife to do that. If Bishop Barnett has said anything tonight that's been a blessing to you, maybe he gave that nugget that really just resonated with you or just inspired you or just confirmed something maybe you were feeling in your spirit. We want you to sow into his life and ministry. It may only be that $5 to take him and his wife. I don't know if you go to Wendy's for $5 now, but you might want to be a blessing to him in some kind of way. We'll be sowing into him as well. We sow where we grow and we sow where we want to go. And so Bishop Barnett is someone we admire and respect and has been a blessing to us. And so we want to sow into him. So Bishop Barnett, in closing, I'm going to give you space to say whatever's on your heart to some young man, young woman, maybe who is in your position, whether it's from an athlete perspective or from a ministry perspective or even a corporate perspective. Whatever the Lord lays on your heart, I want you to say it and close us out with prayer. And I will not be back. We invite everyone to join us next week for Elder Lewis Pollard at 8 o'clock. And continue to support our Mantle Monday series throughout the month of May, as our other guests will be across the bottom of your screen. Bishop Barnett, the floor is yours. God bless you. Thank you.
Yes, sir. And thank you for this opportunity just to kind of share with you. You are doing a excellent job, very needful in the body of Christ, especially when it comes to our churches and not having things in proper place when it comes to that transition, and us having this conversation hopefully is tearing down the walls and the stigmatization that comes with having a leader and having someone succeed, someone that's already in charge. There's a lot of people who as Apostle Candy told me one time that someone told him that if you have another elder come to your church, send him on his way, because there can only be one leader. And that was the mentality that they live by. But I appreciate you, Bishop Travis, for even inviting me, and would love to come back at any point in time to finish our conversation, because there's so much more I could share with you, and hopefully it'll be a blessing to the body of Christ. But for those of you out there, amen, who are in a position, those spiritual leaders, just make sure you have a succession plan in place. Make sure the people know who you are endorsing, so they can start rallying around that person. The people knew that Joshua was going to follow Moses, and they rallied behind him. For those of you who are in position to support your leader, support your leader. That is your only agenda. And it's not to become the pastor. It's not to take over. Your job is to serve and to make your pastor look good. Give him what he needs. Support him. Fight for him, cover him, pray for him, and don't let anybody talk about your spiritual leader. You be the voice and stand up for him, because you will want somebody standing up for you also. For those who are out there who are athletes, you can be saved and you can still play sports and be saved at the same time. Whenever I had a game at 1 o'clock at home, I was at church Sunday night. If my game was until 4, I went to Sunday school in the morning. Even when I went out of town, me and my wife, if she went out of town, we would go to church before the games, depending on what time it was. And so you can still play sports and hold on to your integrity and hold on to what God has called you to do and be a witness for him, even in that arena. And so there's nothing that can limit you. There's nothing that can hold you back. God says he can do exceedingly abundantly more than we could ever ask or think. And as long as we keep him first, he will be that lamp unto our feet and that light unto our path. So trust and believe that God is here to make us leaders, not followers. And when it comes to his ministry, and when it comes to being a witness to those who are out there in the world who don't know him like we do, it is our job to share the good news of Jesus Christ and the baptism in Jesus' name and the infilling of the Holy Ghost. And so hopefully I've addressed those 3 areas, and hopefully it can be a blessing to you and to your families. And again, thank you everybody for being with us on tonight. Most precious eternal Father, we just want to thank you for your kindness, your love, and your mercy. We thank you for this opportunity that you've given us to come together to share your word and to fellowship with my dear brother. Father, I'm asking you, God, right now that you look down upon every heart, every individual that's with you, who has seen this, who will be watching us even at a later date or time, and let them receive this, oh God, and allow them, oh God, to embrace, oh God, the things that were said, and help it to be a blessing to them as they continue their walk with you. Father, we realize we don't know where we're going sometimes, and we don't know how it's going to end, but we put our faith and confidence in you because you know the end from the beginning. Father, we don't belong to ourselves, and we belong to you. Bless every spiritual leader, every pastor, every assistant pastor, every minister, every evangelist, oh God, every preacher, every teacher, those who are operating in the fivefold ministry, as we continue to work together to do that which you've called us to do, to go into the highways and hedges, to preach, to teach, and minister the gospel of Jesus Christ. Now, Father, as we leave this place but not your presence, bring us back at your appointed time. Father, we'll forever give your name the glory, the honor, and the praise. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. God bless you, everybody. Peace be unto you.
If you're concerned about the future of your organization when you step down, then Where Will the Mantle Fall? A biblical and legal guide to succession planning is a must-read for you. It delves into the scriptural and legal aspect of succession planning, characteristics of successors, the people, the process, church bylaws, common myths, even issues with nepotism. Where Will the Mantle Fall? Written by Richmond's own attorney, Pastor Travell Travis, and available at Amazon.com. Looking to start a church, business, or nonprofit organization in 2022? Do you need help forming an LLC, applying for a copyright or trademark, revising church laws, crafting a succession plan, or developing a compensation package for your pastor and staff? Contact the law office of Travell Travis, a Richmond-based legal boutique focused on the needs of pastors, entrepreneurs, creatives, and our community. Let's make your vision a reality in 2022. Visit TravellTravis.com. That's TRAVELL Travis.com.